Viridian, the Green Guide by Clouds. My Head in the Clouds Not Coming Down. Read by Oakshadow 5. Chapter 46. Consequences. Summary. The morning after. Today's Izuku hated yesterday's Izuku. What kind of idiot thought it was a good idea to go from almost dying to passing out at home with only basic first aid? Maybe he should have just gone to the paramedics last night, secret identity be damned. At least then he wouldn't be freaking out in bed trying to think of some sort of half-decent excuse for the mummy-like bandages all over his body as Mom frantically knocked on the door, worried about why he wasn't up yet. "I'm coming in. Okay, Izuku?" Izuku's eyes widened, and he had to settle for hastily pulling his blanket all the way up to his nose as the door swung open. He knew he had some scratches on his face from the fight, but his goggles should have protected most of the upper half of his face, so hopefully Mom would miss the rest of his injuries in the dim light of the room. Maybe. "Are you feeling okay, baby?" Mom asked quietly. "You're usually up by now. What time did you end up going to bed?" Izuku winced as his voice scratched painfully. Right. Smoke inhalation was a thing. He hadn't even thought about that last night. "Probably later than I should have." Mom looked at him with loving concern as she hurried to his side and put her hand on his forehead, making Izuku wince as she touched his burnt skin. "Oh, baby, you're burning up! Why didn't you tell me you were coming down with something?" Izuku grabbed the excuse like a lifeline. "I didn't want to worry you. I've been feeling a little off the last couple of days, but I didn't think it was a big deal and would go away if I drank enough water." Mom melted. "I already told you, baby. You can tell me things. I know you don't want me to be worried about you, but I'm your mother. That's my job." She frowned. "Work called me in today, but maybe I should call them back and tell them I can't come in. I don't want to leave you alone if you're sick." "No, please don't do that." If Mom was around, it would make it that much more difficult for Izuku to find enough privacy to tend to his actual injuries and change the bandages that were probably gross by now. Mom tended to hover when she thought he was sick. "I mean, if work needs you, I don't want you to stay home for my sake, right? Did they say why they called you in?" Mom's face twisted with both sadness and worry. "Apparently there was a huge villain attack last night. One of my coworkers got caught up in it." A flood of guilt rushed over Izuku. "Oh, are they alright?" Was it the berserker attack he'd been involved in last night? Was Mom's coworker someone he hadn't been good enough to save? Was it his fault they were hurt? Mom smiled sadly. "They were injured, but they'll be okay. Apparently not everyone was so lucky." Izuku swallowed thickly. Not everyone was so lucky? Had people... He had done everything he could, but he was just a worthless, quackless kid, so of course it hadn't been enough. "Are you sure you'll be okay here all alone?" Mom put her hand on his forehead again. "You look like you're about to throw up." He felt like he was about to throw up, but it was his fault that Mom's coworker was injured, so he couldn't ask her to stay home. "I'll be fine. I'm probably just going to take some NyQuil and try to sleep it off." "Okay." Mom still looked worried, but she tucked his blankets a little tighter around him and stood to leave. "Call me if you need anything, okay? I don't want you to think you're bothering me at work or anything. You take priority, alright, Izuku? And I know you're feeling nauseous, but don't forget to eat. Would you like me to get you some toast or something before I go?" Izuku shook his head. "You should just get going. I don't want you to be late." Mom rolled her eyes fondly. "Of course you're worried about me when you're sitting in bed with the flu." She kissed his forehead and left him alone. Izuku waited until he heard the front door close before throwing his blankets off with a sigh of relief. His burns might make it easy to fake a fever, but the extra heat of the covers really didn't feel good right now. He considered getting up and changing his bandages before deciding that could wait, until his body stopped feeling like he'd been hit by a truck. He was going to be alone all day anyway, so there wasn't any rush, right? But that left him in bed, doing nothing, bored. Maybe Kaminari would be available to test or something? He shouldn't have school today, right? Izuku grabbed his phone, grimacing at the way he had to stretch to get out of his desk, only to be assaulted by a barrage of notifications the moment he unlocked the screen. It seemed like every news site Izuku subscribed to had at least one article published about what was being called the New Year's Nightmare. Why did people like alliteration so much? Izuku didn't know if he wanted to even read the headlines. His emotions were a complicated storm of guilt and leftover fear from last night, all made worse by physical pain, so he wasn't sure he was in the mood to read a lot of articles praising Endeavor for his heroic takedown. Endeavor under scrutiny for child endangerment in wake of New Year's Nightmare. Izuku did a double take. There weren't even any kids at the attack last night. Had something else happened yesterday that Izuku hadn't heard about? He slowed down and started reading the headlines more carefully, then more frantically the more he read. Vigilante Viridian, a secret hero? Former victims share stories of Musutafu's best-kept secret. What is Viridian's quirk? Local vigilante minimizes casualties in nightmare attack. Viridian meme compilation. Never heard of Viridian? Neither had we. Read here about how this crazy teen became one of Musutafu's most effective vigilantes. Izuku numbly clicked on the article and sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes as he willed the words on the screen to change. They didn't. They were talking about him. It seems like everybody is talking about Viridian in the wake of the New Year's Nightmare, but just who is the vigilante that took the world by storm last night? And how long has he been on the streets? Since several videos went viral of Viridian's action last night, which some are going so far as to call heroic, hundreds of people have been coming forward to share their stories of being saved by the quick-thinking vigilante. Videos? Oh no, what if someone recognized him? They'd find out he was quirkless and they'd make him stop. Well, they would make him stop either way, wouldn't they? But if they found out that he was quirkless, they would be so focused on protecting him that he wouldn't ever be able to help anyone ever again. Izuku didn't know if it was a good or a bad thing that it was so easy to find the videos from last night. From what he could see, there were about 4 videos making the rounds, thankfully all low-quality cell phone cameras that were never quite at the right angle to catch any identifiable features and tended to appear slightly when Izuku moved, which was pretty much constantly, considering he'd been fighting at the time. One video showed him hacking away at some vines to save a civilian, another showed him knocking down the bar wall to create an exit for the remaining civilians, and one, that if Izuku allowed himself to truly enjoy any of the videos, would have been his favorite, showed him fighting the berserker and ended with him running toward the camera, wreathed in orange, blue and green flames, as the alcohol burned off of him. By far the most popular video, though, which was quickly becoming a meme thanks to people who had way too much creativity, was of him hitting a bouncer in the crotch. Izuku groaned and fell back into bed. He was way too tired to deal with this right now. It was a shame that they hadn't been able to recover their most recent berserker alive, and an even greater shame that the monster had failed to eject that troublesome kazoo player that kept interrupting his symphony. Oh well, All for One was nothing if not resilient, and the boy was not so much of a nuisance that a master composer couldn't plant around him. So while it would have been convenient to have him out of the way, his weddling wasn't a priority for now. What was a priority was the next stage in his grand experiment. Tomura needed an assistant, someone loyal and powerful, a guard dog that could support him and be his right hand as he took his place and continued All for One's legacy. He had a grand variety of quirks ready and waiting at his disposal for this assistant, but a mindless drone simply wouldn't do. Tomura needed a monster that would both do and think, which was why the growing number of failed experiments was getting increasingly frustrating. They were still useful, of course, if only as mindless monsters that followed orders perfectly once their programming was complete, which was why All for One hadn't reclaimed their quirks yet. The doctor insisted they could be useful in Tomura's conquest of Hero Society and had even given those failures a name. Nomu. But it wasn't enough. The most recent berserker had been the closest they had come to creating what Tomura truly needed, and the doctor was currently busy examining what was left of him after the Flame Hero's vicious takedown. Not that All for One had high hopes that it would find anything useful. But that was alright. That monster had already given them the key to the perfect experiment. The rose quirk that the villain possessed had been troublesome. Something that All for One had noticed during his centuries of stealing quirks was that each power behaved differently based on its abilities. An air manipulation quirk would feel light when All for One stole it, almost like it could blow away at any moment, while a fire quirk had to be carefully watched so it didn't burn out of control. It was an interesting eccentricity, but one that Alpha One had always dismissed as unimportant before the most recent experiment. The rose quirk behaved like vines, which meant that it had a tendency to tangle. After Alpha One had duplicated it and was attempting to insert it back into the subject's modified body, the different copies of the quirk refused to stay separate. They kept wrapping around one another and knotting together, despite his every effort to get them to lie in any sort of organized fashion. It was almost frustrating enough for Alpha One to give up on that subject entirely, but he was glad he hadn't. It seemed that when the quirks were wrapped together, the body responded to them as if they were a singular quirk. The doctor theorized that as long as the holder's original quirk was still present, they should be able to trick the subject's immune system into thinking there was only one quirk, if they weaved everything together sufficiently. All that was left now was finding the perfect combination of quirks for a dress rehearsal. Ooh, we got another Alpha One bit in this chapter. It's really cool to see what they're doing, because it's a different point of view, and it's really, really interesting. Anyways, guys, I hope you all enjoyed this chapter, chapter 46 of Viridian the Green Guide, and I'll see you all next time. Bye! Hey, outtakes! Endeavor under scrutiny. Enter. Really, really nice new word. Viridian meme compilation. Yes, I would so want to watch that meme compilation. Was of him hitting a bouncer in the crotch. Yes, the crotch punch. Yes.